The basement of our Victorian house had always been my sanctuary. Down here, among the exposed pipes and musty smell of old wood, I could think clearly. It was 3 in the morning when I heard Alana's car pull into the driveway, her heels clicking on the front porch like a countdown timer to something I wasn't ready to face. I'm Jack McKenna, 34 years old, project manager for Riverside Construction. I fix things for a living: broken foundations, crumbling walls, structures that people thought were beyond repair. Turns out, I was about to discover that some things can't be fixed, only demolished and rebuilt from scratch. Alana stumbled through the front door, trying to be quiet, but failing miserably. She'd been doing this dance for months now. Late nights at the office, weekend conferences, emergency client meetings that somehow required her to shower and change clothes before leaving the house. My wife was a junior partner at Brennan & Associates, one of those law firms that specialized in making rich people richer. She'd always been ambitious, but lately her ambitions seemed to involve a lot more makeup and a lot less time at home. I waited until I heard her bedroom door close. Yes, we'd been sleeping separately for 6 months, another red flag I'd been too stupid to acknowledge. Then I crept upstairs, moving through our house like a stranger, which is exactly what I'd become in my own marriage. Her phone was charging on the kitchen counter, screen up, notifications flashing like a neon sign advertising my humiliation. She'd always been careless with technology, never bothering to hide anything because she assumed I was too trusting to look. She was wrong about the trusting part. I'd just been too afraid to confirm what I already knew. The first message made my stomach drop. Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. Same room as usual? B. I scrolled up, my hands shaking as months of deception unfolded before my eyes. Hotel receipts, photos of lingerie I'd never seen her wear, messages so explicit they made me feel sick. But it was the name that really got me. Brent Caruso. Benny to his friends. I knew exactly who he was. Big guy, gold chains, owned Caruso Auto Body on the South Side. He was married to Sandra, a woman I'd met at a few neighborhood barbecues. Quiet, intelligent, with kind eyes and a genuine smile that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. The irony wasn't lost on me. While I was discovering my wife's affair, Sandra was probably lying in bed wondering why her husband was working so many late nights at the shop. I took screenshots of everything, emailing them to a new account I created on the spot. Then I did something that surprised even me. I responded to one of Benny's messages from Alana's phone. Looking forward to it, baby. You make me feel things Jack never could. His response came within minutes. That's because I'm a real man, not some construction worker who thinks a tool belt is jewelry. I screenshotted that too, along with his follow-up message detailing exactly what he planned to do to my wife the next evening. The man had a vocabulary that would make a sailor blush and the spelling skills of a third grader. My neighbor Mrs. Greer was already up, tending to her garden in her bathrobe. Nothing happened on Maple Street without her knowledge, and I had a feeling she'd seen more than she'd let on. Morning, Jack, she called over the fence. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, I replied, stepping onto the back porch. Too much on my mind. She gave me a knowing look. I imagine so. That big fellow with the gold chain has been coming around quite a bit when you're at work. Drives a fancy BMW, thinks he owns the world. So much for subtlety. Mrs. Greer had been watching Alana's affair unfold like her own personal soap opera. How long? I asked. 3 months, maybe 4. Always parks around the corner, but I see him walking up. Alana lets him in through the back door. She paused, studying my face. You didn't know, did you? I shook my head, feeling like the biggest fool in New England. That woman doesn't deserve you, Jack McKenna. Never did. You're worth 10 of her and 20 of him. As I headed to work that morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Alana. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. I almost laughed. After reading her messages with Benny, I knew exactly where she'd be working and what kind of overtime she'd be putting in. But instead of confronting her, I did something that would change everything. I drove to Scully's bar on Harbor Street, the kind of place where blue-collar guys like me went to solve the world's problems over a beer and a basket of wings. Scully himself was behind the bar, a grizzled ex-cop who knew everyone's business and wasn't shy about sharing it. He took one look at my face and poured me a whiskey without being asked. "Rough morning?" he asked, getting rougher by the minute. I showed him one of the screenshots on my phone. "You know this guy, Brent Caruso?" Scully's expression darkened. "Benny the bullshit artist. Yeah, I know him. Comes in here sometimes, bragging about his conquests. Recently he's been talking about some lawyer he's been banging, says she's married to some sucker who doesn't have a clue." The whiskey burned going down, but not as much as the realization that my humiliation was public entertainment. "He mentioned the sucker's name?" I asked. "Nah, but he described him. Construction worker, lives in one of those old Victorians on the north side, too trusting for his own good." Scully met my eyes. "Sound familiar?" I finished my drink and stood up. "If anyone asks, we never had this conversation." "What conversation?" Scully grinned. "But Jack, when you're ready to even the score, you know where to find me." The next morning, I did something I'd never done in 15 years of marriage. I called in sick to work. Instead, I drove to the address I'd found for Sandra Caruso, a modest Cape Cod house about 10 minutes from my own neighborhood. She answered the door in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Even without makeup, she was stunning in a natural way that made Alana's constant primping seem desperate by comparison. "Jack?" She seemed surprised, but not unwelcoming. "Is everything okay?" "Actually, no. Could we talk? I think we have a problem in common." She invited me in, offering coffee while I gathered the courage to destroy her world the way mine had been destroyed. Her house was warm and comfortable, filled with books and plants and the kind of personal touches that made a place feel like home. "Sandra, this is going to be difficult to hear, but I think our spouses are having an affair." She went very still, her coffee mug halfway to her lips. I was wondering when someone would finally say it out loud. That wasn't the response I'd expected. "You knew?" I suspected. Benny's been different for months. Secretive, defensive, spending money we don't have on clothes and cologne. She set down her mug with steady hands. "He told me he was working late, picking up extra jobs to pay for a vacation he wanted to take me on." I showed her the screenshots from Alana's phone. Sandra read them without flinching, though I saw her jaw tighten with each message. "The Riverside Inn," she said finally. "He told me he was doing body work for the owner, paying him in trade for use of a room to store equipment. Room 237, according to these messages." "Of course." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I should have known. Benny's never been creative enough to come up with a good lie. We spent the next 2 hours comparing notes. The timeline matched perfectly. Every late night, every weekend, emergency, every suspicious phone call. Our spouses had been conducting their affair with all the subtlety of a marching band. "What do you want to do about it?" I asked. Sandra was quiet for a long moment, staring out her kitchen window at the bird feeder in her backyard. "I want them to hurt the way they hurt us. But more than that, I want them to face consequences. Real ones." "What did you have in mind?" "Benny thinks I'm stupid. He's been sloppy about more than just the affair. I've been keeping track of his business dealings, and let's just say the IRS would be very interested in his creative bookkeeping." I found myself smiling for the first time in months. "You've been planning your exit strategy." "For longer than you might think. I just needed proof about the affair to make sure I got everything I deserved in the divorce." We shook hands like business partners, which in a way we were. We were in the business of justice, and business was about to be very good. That evening, I implemented the first phase of our plan. When Alana came home from her late night at the office, I was waiting in the living room with a glass of wine and a sympathetic smile. "Rough day?" I asked. She looked genuinely surprised by my attention. We'd been living like roommates for so long that basic courtesy seemed foreign. "The Hendricks case is killing me," she said, accepting the wine. "I might have to work this weekend, too." "That's too bad. I was hoping we could spend some time together. Maybe drive up to the mountains, stay at that bed and breakfast you used to love." The panic in her eyes was almost comical. "Oh, Jack, I can't. This case is at a critical stage. Maybe next month?" "Of course. Work comes first, right?" She kissed my cheek, probably the first physical contact we'd had in weeks, and headed upstairs. Within minutes, I heard her on the phone, voice hushed but urgent. I didn't need to listen at the door to know she was calling Benny, rearranging their weekend plans to accommodate my sudden interest in our marriage. The next morning, Sandra called with an update. "Benny's working this weekend," she said. "Emergency job that came up last minute. Very hush-hush, very important." Funny how our spouses have such demanding careers. Isn't it? By the way, I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about consequences. And I think it's time we started documenting everything, not just for the divorce, but for afterward. I knew exactly what she meant. We weren't just gathering evidence for our lawyers anymore. We were building a case for the court of public opinion, and in a small city like ours, that was often more devastating than any legal judgment. "I'll pick up a few things from the electronics store," I said. "Cameras are so much smaller these days." "Amazing what technology can do," Sandra agreed. "Almost like having eyes everywhere." That afternoon, I installed a dash cam in my truck and a small security camera in my garage, both perfectly legal since they were on my own property. I also bought a voice recorder, the kind journalists use for interviews. If Alana and Benny wanted to play games, they were about to learn that I'd been underestimating myself for years. I might just be a construction worker to them, but I knew how to build things that last. And I was about to build them a trap they'd never escape. The beauty of catching cheaters is that they make it so easy. Alana and Benny had fallen into a routine, meeting every Tuesday and Friday at the Riverside Inn, with occasional weekend encounters when they could manage it. They thought they were being clever, but they were as predictable as sunrise. Sandra and I met every morning at a different coffee shop, comparing notes and planning our next moves. It was during one of these meetings that I realized something unexpected was happening between us. She was telling me about finding a receipt for jewelry in Benny's jacket, jewelry she'd never received, when she laughed at something I said. It was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from anyone in months, and it hit me like a physical force. "You know," she said, stirring her latte, "I'd forgotten what it felt like to talk to someone who actually listens." "Alana used to listen," I replied, "or at least pretend to. Now she just waits for her turn to talk." When did we become so invisible to them? It was a good question. When had my wife stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as an obstacle to her happiness? When had I become the boring husband instead of the man she'd once claimed to love? "Maybe we were never as visible as we thought," I said. "Maybe they just got better at hiding how they really felt." Sandra reached across the table and touched my hand briefly. Their loss. The simple contact sent electricity up my arm. I hadn't realized how starved I was for genuine human connection until that moment. "We should probably focus on the plan," I said, though I didn't want to. "Right. The plan." She pulled her hand back, but I caught the flush in her cheeks. "I've been thinking about the timing. We'd decided to let our spouses dig their holes a little deeper before springing our trap. The deeper the hole, the harder the fall. That evening, I put the next phase into motion. I called Mike Torres, my best friend since high school and the only mechanic I trusted with my truck. "I need a favor," I said, "and it's going to sound weird." "Weird how?" "I need you to get a job at Caruso Auto Body." Mike was quiet for a moment. "This about Alana?" I'd never told him about the affair directly, but Mike wasn't stupid. He'd noticed the tension, the separate bedrooms, the way my wife barely acknowledged his existence anymore. "It's about justice," I said. "Say no more. I've been looking for a change anyway. Caruso pays better than my current shop." Within a week, Mike was working for Benny, learning the ins and outs of his operation. What he discovered was even better than we'd hoped. "Guy's running 3 different scams," Mike reported over beers at Scully's. "Overcharging insurance companies, selling stolen parts, and skimming cash from customers who pay under the table. Enough to get him in real trouble? Enough to shut him down permanently. I've been taking pictures of everything, the books, the parts, even recorded him bragging about ripping off some old lady whose car got rear-ended." Scully, who'd been eavesdropping shamelessly, poured us another round. "Sounds like Benny's about to have a very bad year." "It gets better," Mike continued. "He's been using his shop as a meeting place for some side business. Nothing major, just small-time stuff, but enough to interest the cops if they knew about it." I felt the pieces clicking into place. We weren't just going to expose the affair anymore. We were going to dismantle Benny's entire life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but rubble. "How long do you need?" I asked. "Give me 2 more weeks. I want to make sure we have everything documented." That night, I lay in bed listening to Alana's breathing in the next room and planning her downfall. It should have felt wrong, plotting against the woman I'd once loved enough to marry. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing I'd done in years. My phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. "Can't sleep either?" "Too much excitement for one day," I replied. "Want to grab coffee? I know a place that's open late." I found myself getting dressed and sneaking out of my own house like a teenager. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my wife was probably dreaming about her lover, I was meeting his wife for coffee at midnight. The diner Sandra had chosen was one of those 24-hour places that catered to shift workers and insomniacs. We sat in a corner booth talking in low voices about everything except revenge. "I used to paint," she told me. "Before I got married, I had this dream of opening a gallery, showcasing local artists." "What happened to that dream?" "Benny happened. He convinced me it was impractical, that I should focus on being a good wife instead of chasing fantasies." "That's not a fantasy. That's a goal." She smiled, and I felt that electric connection again. "What about you? Any dreams you gave up?" "I wanted to start my own construction company, specialize in historic renovations, bring old buildings back to life." I gestured around the diner. "This place, for instance. Look at those original tin ceilings, the hardwood floors under all that linoleum. This could be beautiful again with the right attention." "So why didn't you?" "Alana said it was too risky. Better to stick with a steady paycheck than gamble on entrepreneurship." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, 2 people who'd let other people talk them out of their dreams. "After this is over," Sandra said, "maybe we should stop letting other people make decisions for us." Maybe we should. I walked her to her car, and for a moment I thought about kissing her. The urge was so strong it surprised me, but we were both still married, still technically committed to people who'd thrown their own commitments away. "Soon," she said, as if reading my mind. "Soon," I agreed. 2 weeks later, Mike delivered the evidence that would end Benny's career. Photos, recordings, documentation of every illegal activity he'd witnessed. It was enough to send Benny to prison, but that wasn't our goal. Prison was too easy, too clean. We wanted him to lose everything the same way he'd helped destroy our marriages, slowly, publicly, and completely. Sandra had been equally busy. She documented Benny's financial crimes, tracked his spending patterns, and even discovered a second set of books he kept hidden in their basement. "He's been planning to leave me," she told me over lunch at a restaurant across town from our neighborhood. "Found divorce papers he'd already filled out, just hadn't filed yet." "Same timeline as the affair?" "Started about a month after he met Alana. Apparently, she convinced him he deserved better than a small-town wife. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. It was one thing to have an affair, another entirely to plan the systematic destruction of your spouse's life. They really thought they were going to ride off into the sunset together, I said, with our money in our houses, probably laughing about how stupid we were. That afternoon, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and inevitable. I asked Sandra on a real date. Not a planning meeting, I clarified, not a strategy session, an actual date. She was quiet for so long I thought I'd misread the signals between us. Jack, I'd love to, but we're both getting divorced. Our spouses have been dating for months. I think we're allowed to have dinner together. It's not about being allowed. It's about timing. What if they see us? What if they do? What are they going to say? That we're cheating on them? She laughed at that, the sound bright and genuine. When you put it that way, yes, I'd love to have dinner with you. We chose Antonelli's, an upscale Italian place downtown that neither of our spouses could afford on their own. I made reservations for Friday night, the same night Alana would be working late with Benny. The irony was perfect. Friday evening, I put on my best suit, the one I'd worn to our wedding 7 years ago. It still fit, though I'd filled out through the shoulders from years of physical work. I looked at myself in the mirror and realized I looked good, better than I had in years. Confidence, apparently, was an excellent accessory. Alana was already gone when I left the house, off to her client meeting that would last until morning. She'd kissed my cheek on her way out, the gesture so automatic and meaningless it might as well have been a handshake. Sandra was waiting outside Antonelli's when I arrived, and the sight of her made me forget how to breathe. She was wearing a black dress that was elegant without being flashy, her hair loose around her shoulders. She looked like the kind of woman who deserved to be taken to nice restaurants, not hidden away like a guilty secret. "You clean up pretty well," she said, straightening my tie with an intimate gesture that sent heat racing through me. "You're beautiful," I replied, meaning it completely. Dinner was perfect. We talked about everything: books, movies, travel plans, childhood memories. She was intelligent and funny, with a sharp wit that never turned cruel. She listened when I talked, asked follow-up questions, made me feel like the most interesting person in the room. I was falling for her, and I didn't care who knew it. We were sharing dessert when the commotion started near the entrance. Raised voices, the sound of someone arguing with the hostess. I looked up to see a familiar figure pushing past the restaurant staff, Alana. She spotted us immediately, her face cycling through confusion, recognition, and rage in the space of seconds. She stormed across the dining room like an avenging angel, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, loud enough that every conversation in the restaurant stopped. I took a sip of wine, remarkably calm. "This is dinner. Sandra, you remember my wife, Alana." "Who is she?" Alana's voice was shrill, attracting stares from every table. "How dare you?" I smiled, the expression feeling natural for the first time in months. "Meet your lover's wife. We're finalizing our divorce." The color drained from Alana's face. "What?" Sandra stood gracefully, extending her hand like we were at a cocktail party instead of a public confrontation. "Sandra Caruso. I'm married to Benny. Well, for a few more days anyway." "This is insane," Alana stammered. "You can't. This isn't—" I pulled out my phone and showed her the divorce papers I'd filed that afternoon. "Already done. You'll be served Monday morning." "You followed me here," she accused. I laughed, genuinely amused. "Alana, you're not that important. Sandra and I are on a date." The word date hit her like a physical blow. She looked between us, seeing the obvious chemistry, the way Sandra's hand rested on my arm, the intimate way we were sitting. "You can't date her," she said desperately. "Why not? I'm single as of this afternoon." Sandra sat back down, perfectly composed. So am I. Funny how that works. The restaurant manager appeared at our table, flanked by 2 security guards. Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This is my husband, Alana protested. Not anymore, I said cheerfully, and you're disturbing our dinner. As security escorted Alana out, she kept looking back at us, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. I could see her phone in her hand, probably calling Benny to tell him his secret was out. Well, Sandra said, raising her wine glass. That was invigorating. Just wait until she realizes what else we know. We finished dinner in peace, the other diners gradually returning to their own conversations. The manager comped our dessert and apologized for the disturbance, though I could tell he was enjoying the drama as much as everyone else. So, Sandra said as we walked to our cars, what happens now? Now we finish what we started. She kissed me then, right there on the sidewalk outside Antonelli's. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, the kind of kiss that made you believe in second chances. I've wanted to do that for weeks, she admitted. Just weeks? I teased. Don't push it, McKenna. The weekend was chaos. Alana came home Saturday morning, alternating between tears and rage, demanding explanations I wasn't interested in providing. She'd spent the night at Jessica's apartment, her best friend and enabler who'd been encouraging the affair from the beginning. How long have you known? She demanded. Long enough, I replied, packing my clothes into suitcase. I'd decided to move into a hotel until I could find an apartment. No point in prolonging the agony. Jack, we can work through this. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. 4 months isn't a moment, Alana. It's a relationship. She tried a different approach. What about Sandra? You barely know her. This is just revenge. Maybe it started as revenge, I admitted, but it's not anymore. That was the truth. What I felt for Sandra had grown beyond our shared betrayal into something real and powerful. She made me laugh, made me think, made me remember who I was before I'd become half of a failing marriage. I'll fight the divorce, Alana threatened. I'll make this as difficult as possible. Go ahead. I have screenshots of every message between you and Benny, including the ones where you called me a loser and laughed about how clueless I was. She went very still. You went through my phone. You left it open. I just read what was there. That's invasion of privacy. That's evidence. Monday morning brought the first wave of consequences. Alana was served with divorce papers at her office in front of her colleagues and clients. The process server was thorough and professional, making sure everyone in the building knew what was happening. Mike called me from Caruso Auto Body with an update. Benny's losing his mind. Keeps calling someone, yelling about how everything's falling apart. Has he figured out you're working with me? Nah, he's too stupid and too panicked. But Jack, you might want to be careful. He's talking about making you pay for ruining his life. That afternoon, I found my truck's tires slashed in the parking lot at work. All 4 of them cut with something sharp enough to make repair impossible. It was amateur hour intimidation, the kind of thing Benny probably thought was clever. I called the police, filed a report, and made sure the security cameras caught everything. Then I called Sandra. He's escalating, I told her. I know. He came home this morning, started throwing things around the house. I've moved into my sister's place until this is over. Good. I don't trust him not to hurt you. What about you? Are you safe? I'm fine. But I think it's time to play our ace. We'd been holding back the evidence of Benny's financial crimes, waiting for the right moment to deploy it. That moment had arrived. I called Detective Tom Valente, a guy I'd known since high school who worked white-collar crime for the city police. We met at Scully's, where I laid out everything Mike had documented. Jesus, Jack, Tom said, flipping through the photos and recordings. This guy's been busy. Busy enough for charges? Busy enough for a task force, insurance fraud, tax evasion, receiving stolen property. We've been trying to build a case against him for months. Well, now you have one. Tom studied my face. This is about more than civic duty, isn't it? He's been screwing my wife for 4 months. I'd be lying if I said this was purely altruistic. Fair enough. But Jack? Once I start this investigation, it's out of your hands. You need to stay away from Caruso. Let us handle it. Understood. But I wasn't done with Benny yet. Not by a long shot. Tuesday evening, Sandra and I had dinner at her sister's house. A normal domestic scene that felt revolutionary after months of deception and conflict. Her sister Lisa was a nurse, practical and no-nonsense, who'd taken one look at the situation and offered unconditional support. I never liked Benny, Lisa said over dessert. Too loud, too flashy, always trying to impress people who weren't impressed. He fooled me for 8 years, Sandra replied. No, he didn't. You knew something was wrong, you just didn't want to admit it. It was a fair point. We'd both ignored red flags for years, choosing comfortable denial over difficult truth. What's next? Lisa asked. Sandra and I looked at each other. We'd been so focused on gathering evidence and planning revenge that we hadn't thought much beyond the immediate crisis. Divorce proceedings start next week, I said. Should be straightforward since we have documentation of the affair. Same here, Sandra added. And once the criminal charges are filed against Benny, I'll have grounds for an emergency divorce. That's the legal stuff, Lisa said. What about the personal stuff? What about you two? It was the question we'd been dancing around for days. What were we to each other beyond shared betrayal and mutual attraction? We're taking it slow, Sandra said diplomatically. Slow is good, I agreed. We've both got a lot to work through. But later, as we sat on Lisa's back porch watching the sunset, Sandra took my hand and said, I don't want to take it that slow. What do you mean? I mean, I'm tired of letting other people dictate my happiness. I'm tired of being careful and appropriate and worried about what everyone thinks. She turned to face me, her eyes bright with determination. I want to be with you, Jack. Not as revenge against our spouses, not as a rebound relationship, but because you make me happy. You make me happy too, I said, meaning it completely. Then let's stop pretending this is complicated. Let's just be happy. She kissed me then, and this time there was nothing hesitant about it. It was the kiss of a woman who'd made up her mind, who was ready to fight for what she wanted. I was ready to fight too. Wednesday morning brought the news I'd been waiting for. Detective Valente called to tell me they'd raided Caruso Auto Body at dawn, seizing records and arresting Benny on multiple charges. The investigation Mike had helped build was solid enough to ensure Benny wouldn't see the outside of a jail cell for several years. He tried to run, Tom told me, made it about 6 blocks before we caught up with him, had a suitcase full of cash and a plane ticket to Florida. What about Alana? What about her? She's not involved in his business crimes, but she'll be implicated in the affair. That's not a crime, Jack, just a betrayal. He was right, of course. Adultery might be morally wrong, but it wasn't illegal. Alana would face social consequences, professional embarrassment, and financial loss from the divorce, but she wouldn't face criminal charges. It should have felt like enough, but it didn't. That evening, Sandra and I met at Antonelli's again, partly because the food was excellent and partly because we were reclaiming the space where our new relationship had been publicly announced. The staff recognized us, seating us at the same table where Alana had made her scene. So Benny's in jail, Sandra said, raising her wine glass. How does it feel? Satisfying, I admitted, but incomplete. What do you mean? Alana gets to walk away from this relatively unscathed. Embarrassed, maybe, but not destroyed the way she tried to destroy us. Sandra was quiet for a moment, considering. Maybe that's enough. Maybe we don't need to destroy her to win. Maybe you're right. But as we were finishing dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You think you've won, but this isn't over. I'll make you pay for ruining everything. I showed the message to Sandra, who frowned. That's not Benny. He's in jail. No, that's Alana. How do you know? Because she's the only one who thinks I ruined everything instead of just exposing what was already ruined. Over the next few days, the harassment escalated. Anonymous calls to my work claiming I was stealing from job sites. Fake reviews posted online about Sandra's photography business, calling her work amateurish and overpriced. Someone even called the police claiming to have seen me breaking into my own house. It was petty, vindictive, and ultimately pointless, but it was also revealing. Alana couldn't accept responsibility for her actions, so she was lashing out at everyone else. She's making herself look crazy, Sandra pointed out after the third false police report. Good. Crazy people don't get sympathy from divorce judges. Friday afternoon, I got a call from my lawyer with interesting news. Alana's attorney wants to meet, he said. Apparently, she's ready to negotiate. What changed her mind? Hard to say. Maybe the criminal investigation spooked her. Maybe she's realized that fighting this will only make things worse. The meeting was set for Monday morning at my lawyer's office. Alana would be there with her attorney, ready to discuss terms for an uncontested divorce. I should have been relieved. Instead, I was suspicious. Saturday evening, Sandra and I were having dinner at her sister's house when my phone rang. It was Mike, calling from Scully's bar. Jack, you need to get down here, now. What's wrong? Just get here, and bring Sandra. We found Mike at the bar, nursing a beer and looking grim. Scully was behind the bar, his expression equally serious. Tell them what you told me, Scully said. Mike took a long drink before speaking. I was cleaning out my locker at Caruso's today, getting my tools before they shut the place down permanently. Alana was there. Alana? What was she doing there? Talking to some of Benny's crew, the guys who didn't get arrested because they were smart enough to stay away from the financial stuff. Sandra leaned forward. Talking about what? You two. She was offering them money to mess with you. Nothing violent, she said. Just enough to make your lives difficult. I felt cold anger settling in my stomach. How much money? 5,000 each. She had it with her, in cash. Did they take it? Mike shook his head. These guys might be criminals, but they're not stupid. They know the cops are watching anyone connected to Benny. They told her to take her money and get lost. But she's not going to stop there, Sandra said. No, Scully agreed. She's desperate. Desperate people do stupid things. We spent the rest of the evening discussing security measures. Sandra would stay at her sister's house for a few more days. I would be careful about my routines, vary my routes to and from work. We would both document any further harassment, but I was done playing defense. Sunday morning, I called Alana directly for the first time since she'd been served with divorce papers. We need to talk, I said when she answered. Jack, how did you... Meet me at Antonelli's, 1 hour. I'm not going back there. That place is... 1 hour, Alana. Or I call Detective Valente and tell him about your conversation with Benny's crew yesterday. She was there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table, looking smaller than I remembered. The confident, ambitious woman I'd married had been replaced by someone desperate and defeated. You look terrible, I said, sitting across from her. Thanks, you look happy. I am happy, for the first time in years. She studied my face, searching for some sign of the man she'd once been able to manipulate. This is all about her, isn't it? The photographer. This is about you betraying our marriage for 4 months and then trying to make me the villain when I found out. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. How was it supposed to happen? You and Benny were going to ride off into the sunset together? She nodded, tears starting to fall. He said he loved me. He said we were going to start fresh somewhere new. With his wife's money and my house as collateral. I didn't know about the financial stuff. I thought he was successful. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to sign the divorce papers without contest. You're going to split our assets 50-50 as agreed. and you're going to stop harassing me and Sandra. Or what? Or I release the screenshots of your messages with Benny to social media. All of them, including the ones where you laughed about how stupid I was and planned to take me for everything I was worth. Her face went white. You wouldn't. Try me. She signed the papers the next day. The divorce was finalized within a month, clean and simple. Alana moved to Boston, taking a job with a firm that didn't know about her recent scandals. Benny was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for fraud and tax evasion. His auto shop was sold to pay restitution to his victims. Sandra's divorce was even simpler, since Benny was in no position to contest anything from his jail cell. 6 months later, Sandra and I were having dinner at Antonelli's again, celebrating the opening of her photography gallery. The walls were covered with her work, stunning black and white portraits that captured the soul of her subjects. Any regrets? She asked, raising her wine glass. About the divorce, about the revenge, about us. Any of it. I considered the question seriously. The man I'd been a year ago would never have believed he was capable of the systematic destruction of another person's life. But that man had also never believed his wife was capable of betrayal. No regrets, I said finally. They made their choices. We just made sure they faced the consequences. And us? Any regrets about us? I looked at the woman across from me, brilliant and beautiful and honest in ways my ex-wife had never been. Especially no regrets about us. She smiled, the expression lighting up her entire face. Good, because I have something to tell you. What's that? I love you, Jack McKenna. I love you too, Sandra Caruso. Or should I say, future Sandra McKenna. Is that a proposal? It's a possibility. She laughed, the sound bright and joyful. I like possibilities. Outside, the city hummed with life and possibility. Somewhere, Alana was probably sitting in her Boston apartment, alone and bitter, wondering how her perfect plan had gone so wrong. Somewhere, Benny was sitting in his jail cell, probably still convinced he was the victim in this story. But here, in this restaurant where our new life had begun with a public confrontation, Sandra and I were building something real and lasting. Something based on honesty instead of deception, respect instead of manipulation. Last call for karma, sweetheart, I murmured, thinking of my ex-wife. Hope you enjoyed the show. Sandra squeezed my hand. What was that? Nothing important, just closing a chapter. Ready to start a new one? With you? Absolutely.